All right, so welcome everyone to our session today. So we've got Tash Treveton from Inspired EC with our session, The Importance of Your Role with Infants in Education and Care Settings. So Tash has started her career as an untrained casual and since then has studied and gained experience as an educator, educational leader and nominated supervisor before co-funding Inspired EC in 2008. All right, so we'll hand it over to you, Tash.
Hi. First, I'd like to just do a quick acknowledgement. Not a quick one, but yeah. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land. I'm on actually a Wabakal land at the moment. Hopefully everyone knows the land that they're on at the moment. Do you know what land you're on, Pamela?
Yeah, so we're sitting on Durrumbal country here in Rockhampton.
Excellent. I would like to pay my respects to elders, past, present, and those emerging that we care for, and also pay my respects to any Aboriginal people or Torres Strait Islander people who are watching this session. The reason I wanted to do this session is I last year spent some time over in New Zealand with a lady called Penny Brownlee, and I did a infant toddler intensive week over there, and let's just say it pretty much changed my life. It really made me realise there was some stuff that I saw that I can't unsee, and that's going to happen today to you. And anyone who watches this, it's like this. There's a warning there for you: is that you can't actually unsee or unknow what you're about to learn. So if you don't already know what that is, and I basically came back and I nearly wanted to have another baby, so I could probably get it right this time. And I also said to my team that anyone who has a baby, if anyone felt pregnant, I'm building them a nursery at the office. I know a lot of the people in my team want to come back to work early, but just the things that I learned when I did that course with Penny was how important those first few months in particular, but the first 1,000 days are for babies, and how it impacts on the rest of the time, rest of their life. And I think it's really important that everyone who's working in an early education and care setting, from the management to the cook to the admin, everyone understands how important those first few years are. They're the most important years, but we'll unpack that as we go. So I would like you to think about what your role is. What do you see your role is with infants and babies? Because really our own vision, beliefs, understanding, knowledge will drive our intent on what we do with babies every day. So it's really really unpacking what you think your role is, and exploring that with your team. So just to really be solid in what you see that role as being. I'm just going to play this video just for about 7 minutes. See if it comes up here, otherwise I might need to duck into the video. Can you see that on your screen, Pamela?
No.
Okay, yep, that's all right. I'll do the new share. Can you see that now?
Yep.
Yeah. And can you hear that?
Yep.
Excellent.
The real action of compassion, and I'll talk about this in the practice of compassion, is touch. We have amazing hands that are much more dexterous than our non-human primate hands, that enable us to do all kinds of amazing things: tool use, signals, signs, and the like, various kinds of gripping behavior, of course, for caretaking. And so we asked, can you communicate compassion with a touch, with tactile behavior? Now, I could talk for about 45 minutes with how amazing the skin is. It's our largest organ, and I'll spare you those details. Needless to say, it's fascinating. Scientists are discovering specific neurons in the skin that process information about touch. We know the immune response is right there in the skin, which is why a lot of touch probably makes you live longer. And so my student, Matt Hertenstein, asked, can you communicate compassion and a lot of emotions we're soon to talk about with touch? And indeed, so what we did is we built a barrier in our lab, and the person stuck their arm through, and they waited, and this other person was given a list of emotions. They had to touch the person with a 1-second touch to the forearm, and that person on the other side is like, what the heck was that, right? And they make a guess, and what you find, quite remarkably, those are accuracy rates in the blue bars, right? In this study, chance guessing was 8%, right? And what you're seeing, compassion, they're getting it right about 55–60% of the time. Pretty amazing sympathy in this case. And I am ethically obliged to tell you 2 gender differences in this study. We had all gender combinations, women touching men and women and vice versa. When the woman tried to communicate anger to the man, he got 0 right. He had no idea what she was doing. I was like, wow, that's unbelievable. And when the man tried to communicate compassion to the woman, she didn't know what was going on. So good luck. Ethologists who lived in different parts of the world quickly recognized that in a lot of our cultures, people spend most of their time in direct physical contact with one another. You know, estimates are that the non-human primates spend about 20% of their waking days grooming each other, 10 to 20%. You go to various other cultures and they're spending a lot of time in direct physical contact. And regrettably, we are a touch-deprived culture in the West. And this has been documented. One of my favorite examples is a researcher who studied the conversations of friends in different parts of the world. They're sitting in a cafe, and in England, the 2 friends, holding constant the unit of time, touched each other 0 times. In the United States, in bursts of enthusiasm, we touch each other twice. And in Puerto Rico, the same friends touched each other 180 times. We know, as an opportunity for intervention, just think about these thought experiments. Babies that were placed in orphanages that had this is 70, 80 years ago, that had all the nutrients and warmth and physical security, died at rates of 75% until they told the caretakers, hold the baby. They stopped dying, right? Unbelievable mechanism of social well-being is touch. And maybe the greatest, Michelangelo said, to touch is to give life. And he was right. He was absolutely right. So what we know in this realm of touch, and I'll talk to you about some cultivations or interventions that flow out of this, is that when you touch somebody, Edmund Rolls, the neuroscientist, has found you activate the orbitofrontal cortex, that site of reward and compassion and the like. We know that touch builds up cooperative relationships, or what evolutionists call, it reinforces reciprocity. And there are studies of primates. You see those 2 guys grooming each other. If that one on the left finds some food accidentally, guess who it shares that food with? The one on the right. They use grooming to build up cooperative alliances. There are basic studies showing that touch signals safety and trust. And needless to say, there's a whole new science of touch soothing. And what we know, now you can put your facts together, basic warm touch calms cardiovascular stress. It activates the vagus nerve. James Gross at Stanford has found. One study has found it leads to oxytocin release. It makes people more cooperative. In the prisoner's dilemma game, if the experimenter walks by and goes, it's good to have you in the experiment, and he pats that person on the back, or she pats the person on the back, that person is twice as likely to cooperate just by feeling a pat on the back. It is profoundly important. So what about touch therapies? These are real. This isn't some weird Berkeley idea that we spin out in a hot tub. I don't even own a hot tub, but, and Tiffany Field has changed medical practice by promoting the science of touch. And this should be encouraged in classrooms and therapeutic settings alike. Some of the highlights in the over 80 studies of touch therapies rigorously conducted by Tiffany Field and colleagues in hospital settings is that touching premature babies, just regular physical contact, you get a boost of weight gain by 47%. Touching patients with Alzheimer's and engaging them to engage in social touch precipitously leads to drops in their depressive symptomatology that's associated with that organic disease. For teachers and people working with kids, teachers who pat students on the back in a friendly way, that student is twice as likely to speak out in class. Librarians, a study in the last year has found who pat their student checking out the book on the hand, that student likes the library more and is more likely to come back. There's new work in the Berkeley School of Public Health, just getting medical doctors to make eye contact, pat the person on the back. They're starting to show greater survival rates in the face of complex diseases. So this is going to be very important.
So the aim of that video was definitely to, is the PowerPoint back up? No, okay. So obviously that research is showing how important touch and connection is for babies, and that's one of the first most important things that we need to do. Babies need to feel love and connection for their brain to actually develop. So Sue Gerhardt is the author of a book called Why Love Matters, and I strongly recommend it for anyone who's working with infants and toddlers to read that. But the kind of brain that each baby develops is the brain that comes out of his or her experiences with other people. Love facilitates a massive burst of connections in this part of the brain. A baby needs to feel love to learn, and in order for a baby to feel secure and loved, they need a consistent pattern of responsiveness. And that's one of the things that, and the conversations that I hear when I go out and do consults, and the conversations in infant and toddler rooms is, they've got to, there's only one person with 4 babies. We've got 4 babies to one person, and they've just got to get used to me not being able to be there for them all the time. And it's tragic because people don't realize how important that responsiveness is. It's actually doing damage to a child's brain to not respond to them. And so what I'm trying to advocate for is that in services that everyone understands about that whole idea of a village takes a village to raise a child. Like, we need to know that if someone calls you from the baby room and says, I need help, I've got more than 2 babies who need responsiveness right now, everyone will come and support that. So whether it's from the admin to the cook to the director, everyone understands that if there's a baby crying, someone needs to be there to respond to them. And so they need that consistent pattern of responsiveness from their primary caregiver to cement the expectations that all their needs are going to be attended to. And these positive emotions have a demonstrable effect on the brain. Emotion allows babies to pay attention, and attention promotes learning. So the more secure a baby feels will affect their intellectual potential, their language development, regulations of feelings, development of empathy, trust and motivation, an acquisition of conscious identity, self-confidence and self-esteem, the ability to cope with stress and resilience, and the ability to make and sustain future relationships. So there's a link there with Sue's book. So you can tell, when she was asked if you could tell a little bit about the importance of this early environment in terms of the babies developing a sense of who they are, what's becoming really clear is that the brain, it's not just the brain that develops in an interactive sort of way, but our actual sense of self is a very interactive phenomenon. If you like, people do not become themselves without input from other people. And in babyhood, this is particularly acute because their basic self is starting to emerge through feedback really from the people around the baby. So the more you know, the more you see, and the more you trust, the more you be. The work of Nathan Wallace is groundbreaking. He does a lot around the first 1,000 days. He's been out to Australia a few times. If you get the opportunity to listen to him speak, I highly recommend it. We're just going to look at a quick video from him. But write his name down, explore. There's lots of videos on YouTube of his, and they're brilliant. So we're going to watch that one of those, a short one now. That links up. Can you hear
some
that?
of the big insights that we've got from neuroscience in the last
And can
sort
you
of
see the
10,
video?
15 years, one of the first things to really stand out is that the first 3 years are the most important. Not just because babies are precious and pure and fragile, I mean that's reason enough, but the first 3 years are the most important essentially because the human brain is not ready to be born until we're 3 years old. Right, that makes us very, very different from every other animal on the planet because, you know, a horse gets up and walks immediately after it's born, right? A human being, you know, takes 12 months to learn to walk. Does that mean a horse is cleverer than a human being? No, it just means that they follow different pathways. The human brain is different from every other animal on the planet. Your heart, your lungs, your liver, all your other organs when your baby's born are doing the job they're going to do for the rest of the baby's life. All they're going to do is get larger. The same is true of an animal's brain. It's doing the job it's going to do for the rest of its life. The human brain is different because we don't reach that stage of maturity until we're 3. So that's a huge gift for human beings. It means we have the first 3 years to gather data on what sort of brain we need for our lifetime. So we're not just based on genetics. Actually, only 30% of our genes are set when we're born. 70% of our genes are what are called transcription genes. So they rely on a transcript from the environment before they decide which genes are activated and which ones aren't. So our brains, another example is our brain's only 15% connected when you're born. So 85% of the connections are going to happen outside of the womb. I mean, even when we look to the mass of a young baby, your baby's brain is somewhere around 25% of an adult size when the baby's born, and yet it's about 95% of an adult size by the time you're 4. So we're seeing lots of growth happening. You know, the early years are really profound. There's 2 major reasons why the human brain's not fully formed when we're born, right? One is just survival of the mother, because if the baby's brain, you know, they'd have to have a head the size of a 3-year-old and mum wouldn't survive childbirth. And if she did, there'd be no such thing as siblings because her'd do it again. But the major reason why human beings don't have a fully formed brain at birth is because it allows us to adapt to our environment like no other creature can. It means we can live on any part of the planet and we're not bound to the environments we're born in because we spend 3 years data gathering on the environment we're in. And then we sort of hardwire a brain for a lifetime full of it. So in that way, the first 3 years are the most important education you'll ever get in your whole life. It's the first 3 years where human beings have the ability to impact on the potential of that human being. No time is greater than in the first 3 years. That's only a tragedy in New Zealand because, again, we have this cultural belief that the first 3 years don't matter. We will sell our houses and shift into whole different suburbs to get to the right high school because we think high school is really important, but we'll just go to the closest early childhood centre or, you know, yeah, but whereas what the research tells us is all of your capabilities are really set by the time you're 3. There's Harvard University studies, I mean there's lots of studies supporting this sort of information, but there's one I could think of specifically, Harvard University postgraduate school, that talked about how they could predict what income your child will be on when they're 35 because they're able to predict what level of qualification the child will have by the time they're 35 based on nothing else other than the number of words spoken to that baby per day between the ages of 0 and 1. Right? Now that's fairly profound, and that's because the brain is in this crucial data gathering mode in the first 3 years. You know, it's spending 3 years gathering data, and basically the baby that is spoken to a whole lot is gathering data that, wow, this is a very complex world, isn't it? Right, you know, I'm having to do this relationship thing all the time. Remember at the start I said when you interact or when you're in relationship, you use more of your brain than when you're doing things by yourself. So the baby being spoken to a whole lot is engaging all these interactive parts of their brain.
Does that mean using baby talk or any words even to an adult level?
Yeah, it doesn't really matter. It's about holding the baby in relationship. You can be talking gobbledygook if you want, as long as your baby's eyes are connecting with your eyes and you are both enjoying the interaction and it's responsive. It's that responsive thing that really makes for quality interaction. So you following the baby's lead, you know, the baby pokes out their tongue and you poke the tongue back out at them and they're like, oh, she's copying me. You know, it's just that interaction. Obviously, you want to surround them with, I mean, baby talk's easier for them to hear, because it's at a, you know, it's at a higher pitch and babies' ears aren't fully developed, so they hear those higher sounds much easier. That's why we all naturally go like this when we go to talk to the baby, because they can hear that much easier. But really, it's just about interacting with your baby and holding your baby. The baby that spends the first 3 years plonked down in front of the TV, which remember is not engaging the interactive parts of the brain, even when Cookie Monster's pretending to be interactive. And, you know, do you know what letter this is? That's right. It's a, you know, the child may look like they believe they're interacting with the Cookie Monster, but if we had them hooked up to a brain scan, we'd see that it's not engaging the interactive parts of their brain. You know, television doesn't. So yeah, the child that's not getting many words a day spoken to by a person, their brain's getting the message that it's not a very complex world, because about the most complex thing you do is interact with other people. I don't want people to get the message from that they should hold their baby in front of them and interact constantly all day when the baby's clearly sick of it. You've got to pick up on the babies, you know. Yeah, but it is generally the baby that's held in relationship more and interacted with more is the child that will get the message to grow a nice big healthy frontal cortex.
So, and like I said, there's heaps more videos. There's so much research that's
Some of the big insights that we've got from neuroscience.
About, just change the screen. It's just how important those first 1,000 days are. And I really don't believe that probably 80% of people working with babies really understand that. I truly believe that our training organisations and our modules around our basic training around working with infants and toddlers really needs to be adjusted to have this information in there so that the people that are working with babies really understand. We also, and that's where that responsiveness, just that connectedness, and I think when we link back to Bronfenbrenner's systems of influence, we look at the fact that as the more and more babies are in care for longer periods of time, the more important our role is. And instead of seeing the family around the baby and then us in that wider circle, we need to see ourselves in partnership with parents. That our role is just as important as the parents' role within those first 3 years, just in that interaction to help build that really strong prefrontal cortex, which is going to support them for the rest of their life. Another person that is really important to research if you're someone who works with infants is Emmy Pickler. She was a Hungarian pediatric nurse who worked in orphanages, and some of her work is, she worked for 40 years. She did research with infants and toddlers, and some of the key points I'm just going to touch on just for time perspective today is the most important thing that we can do with babies is respond to them. And that's what the most, it doesn't matter what resources you've got. You know, you can have all the fancy toys and resources and environments, but the most important thing that we can do for babies is respond to them, because like if you saw in Nathan's video, because they're gathering that data to build their brain that is going to support them for the rest of their life. If a baby isn't responded to, their actual fight and flight brain develops more than their prefrontal cortex, which is where our empathy and our relationship ability comes from. So if a baby isn't responded to, their fight and flight brain will develop, and that's how they'll live for the rest of their life. They will constantly be in fight or flight. Attachment is so important. We need to, what I tend to see a lot in services is that the people that work in the baby room, you know, usually there's trainees, there's a lot of, even when it comes to rostering and things like that, we tend to make sure that we're fair to the adults in the space from a rostering perspective, but we know that attachment is so important for babies, where that consistency of of the people in that space, and when you know, I still remember we used to rotate rosters, like, you know, you might do a week early and then a week late, so that the family, so that the adults felt that it was fair. However, really in a baby room, fairness is about what's best for the babies that are in that space. So having that same person that is there when that baby arrives is the most important thing. We just need to switch our thinking around that. The Pickler collection, that website there, is an amazing collection of information that is mainly free, so you can definitely get lots of information there. But one of the key things that Emmy Pickler talked about was positioning of babies, and it's this can be quite what I'm about to say now can be quite challenging for some people, but Dr. Emmy Pickler talked a lot about not putting a baby in a position that they can't get in themselves. And one of the key things that most parents are told from when they've got a new baby is about tummy time. And there is a lot of research to show that tummy time isn't actually a positive thing to do for babies. Tummy time is something that should only happen when a baby can actually get onto their tummy themselves. So like I said, I won't go too much into that, but I strongly recommend you doing a bit of research, going to that website and having a look at that, because the babies that Emmy Pickler worked with and the team that she worked with, when babies weren't put into positions that they couldn't get into themselves, when they were able to develop and get to that space in their own time because their bodies developed in the way that they were supposed to, they grew up to have much more balance, much more body strength, all that sort of stuff. So it's really interesting stuff to look at. So being with babies, observing and noticing, you know, start with full attention, and being present is a present. So really look at your priorities in a room. I know we can sometimes feel really busy. I read something about how being in a baby room is like having lots of mothers-in-laws to keep happy. So, you know, we're trying to make sure that the room looks nice and tidy and everything looks pretty, but really the most important thing is being present with those babies that are there. Really make that your focal point. If you need to communicate with families about, you know, I know it looks messy, but we're building connections or something like that, but making sure parents know that that your priority is being fully present with their children. Also understanding around schemas and how they develop. So schemas are repeated behaviours that children do to develop a stronger understanding of the real world around them. And it's usually the stuff that really frustrates us a lot, you know, throwing things, hiding things, dumping things, all that sort of stuff. But if you work with infants and toddlers, definitely do a bit more research around schemas. But they appear through play. They can come one at a time, or they can be in bunches, but they're actually building blocks for the brain, repeated behaviours that in turn forge connections in the brain. So definitely unpack that. But they establish an internal cognitive structure. They help children to construct meaning in what they're doing. And for educators, the more you know about schemas and the more you know about brain development, the more you're able to see what's actually happening for a child and actually support them in what you're doing. Like that, your role is to support them through, you know, the environment you create, the connections that you have, the relationships that you build. The more you know, the more you see. So and then you're able to use that information to support those babies and toddlers the most you can. So one of the ways that we can support babies is the environment, making sure that the environment supports the age and stage of and in particular for babies, it's really about knowing how babies learn so that you're able to provide an environment that supports it. So we want to avoid overstimulation. So not too much colour, too much toys, you know, natural elements. Think about the fact that the stage of play for babies is senses. So exploring all their 7 senses. We have 7, and there is an 8th sense that will be official soon. So, but you know, looking at your environment through the lens of each of the senses, and making sure that there's a variety. I think we do a lot through sight and touch, but we don't think too much about some of the other senses, especially smell and sound. Like those two are, I think, are very overlooked element of our environment sometimes. Make sure you get down to the baby's height when you're planning your environment. Like, get down and see what they're going to see from their space. Like, close your eyes and hear what they hear and smell to support doing that. Ensure there's a balance of spaces. We at Inspired EC, we talk a lot about personality types, and even if you just look at the basic level of introvert and extrovert, introverted people, including babies and young children, they actually get drained by being around other people a lot. They need spaces to feel cozy, to hide, to feel like they're just on their own, not to be over, just to have some downtime and recharge. But also your extroverted children need to be around other people. They get drained when they're actually not having enough engagement. Again, use your knowledge of child development to provide appropriate environments. So I'll just look through some of these. So you can see these, the photo up to the left is really looking at schema, the schema of rolling, and which is rotation. Lots of loose parts you can see here too, which when you're providing an environment for, I think for all children, but in particular infants and toddlers, is the more open-ended materials are, the better they're able to use them in a way that suits them. It makes our life easier as well, because we're not trying to reinvent the wheel all the time. When children have resources that are able to be used in a way that fits their needs, rather than us having to find all these specific things, it makes our lives easier, but it also enables them that freedom to use things in a way that is meaningful for them. So also one of our roles with babies is documentation, and I really feel strongly about our role as advocates for children, and I feel that documentation is a really strong way that we can do that. So with babies in particular, being able to convey the importance of the things that we've talked about, like connection, open-ended resources, time, responsiveness, being able to share that knowledge through documentation is a way to actually advocate for those children, especially these children that are nonverbal, because parents aren't given that information when they have a baby. They're taught how to keep them physically well, but most aren't given the information to help them develop a really strong brain for the rest of their lives. And it's really hard for parents when they've got there's so much going on for them, but they're not given the right information. So that what we can do for those babies is to help advocate for them, because we're the trained professionals, and be sharing that information. So here you can see some really simple environments that support what those babies need to do, but that can sometimes feel that they're not as pretty or as fancy as some environments tend to be. They just need to be simple, highly sensorial, and meet that age and stage. Don't forget about nature for babies. We really want to make sure that babies get to connect with natural elements, and you can see here it doesn't have to be, again, a big fancy outdoor development. It's just natural materials and natural elements. Be careful, obviously be very aware of your plant types that we use, because we know babies are going to put them all in their mouth or chew on them, or but so that you can actually, on KidSafe WA has the best list of plants. Some poisonous plant lists can be a little bit over the top and extreme, where they're not a real risk to children, but KidSafe WA has a really good list. That's the one I'd recommend. So again, you can see different floor surfaces and just different textures, nice gentle light, but not overabundance of stimulating elements. One interesting thing to think about is mirror use. I know a lot of people like to use mirrors with babies. Again, Emmy Pickler's did a bit of research around the use of mirrors with babies, not to have it not too much until after the age, I think, of 12 months, because babies they touch the they touch the mirror and see the face, but then it can give the brain the wrong, like the babies are better off to look at real faces and touch real faces so that they can feel the contours and give that right connection in the brain around what a human face is. Yeah, so don't know what time we've got now. Finishing very early, no conversation.
Yeah, I was going to say earlier on when you were saying
Yep.
about the parents are good enough to worry about with making sure they meet their physical needs without their
Mhm.
brain development. That's, you know, before there's any other sort of, you know, if they're delayed development or premature or anything like that. So yeah, it is quite complex when you think about it.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting, and it's hard when parents aren't. I mean, our social media, not even just social media itself, like toy companies and things, like they put all this information across that parents need all these resources. The most important resource for any baby is a responsive adult or a responsive person. Yeah. So any questions, Pamela?
No, well, I was just going to say I had a premature baby, and in the NICU they used to, you know, constantly get us down there and hands on the babies, you know. As soon as she was having any heart issues, it would be like, Mum, get your hand on Bub straight away. So
Oh, it's amazing,
when you were
isn't
saying
it?
about touch, yeah, it sort of really resonated with me there because yeah, with her being, I think she was 10 weeks preemie, so even doing the little kangaroo cuddles was you know, chest to chest, you know, the nurses would always see just the rise in her stats and everything. So yeah,
That's amazing.
yeah, it just really resonated with me when you were saying about the
Yeah.
whole touch side of it. Yeah.
Yeah, and to know that that's such a simple thing for us to do.
Yeah.
It doesn't cost anything. It doesn't require any huge level of, you know, training or anything. It's just connection and just being and understanding that that is the most important thing to do, and that it's the most simple thing to do as well.
Yeah, and I know even like in a world of chaos like we're in at the moment, you know, sometimes you do feel everything is out of control. What can I do? And just knowing that, you know, being there and holding a child, or, you know, as I was saying, just a simple touch on the arm or on the shoulder, you know, can be that little bit that the child needs to sort of switch on and think, yep, I do feel safe. I do feel like I belong.
Yes, yep, and feel connected and valued. Yes,
Yeah.
yep, no, definitely.